welcome back to the Nonprofit Missionary Podcast. I apologize for the audio, it's not going to last for very long. My name is Ken McQuiller. We're here to help you become
What's going on?
By establishing faith-based nonprofits, getting funding so that you can focus on long-term outreach and impact. So we have a guest today. His name is Steve. You'll learn more about him in his intro and everything like that. So I'm really excited. It's our first guest that we've had on the podcast, and I hope that you guys are encouraged by what he has to say. So let's check it out.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Nonprofit Missionary Podcast. I am here with Steve. Steve, thank you for joining us, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm one of the managing partners / owners of Financing Solutions. And for the last 14 years, Financing Solutions has been the largest provider of lines of credit to small nonprofits in the United States. So most people who are maybe listening to this are like, oh, there's a company that specializes in small nonprofits providing with line of credit. I can use you. And we're going to talk about that today, I'm sure. But yep, that's what we do. We're very well known, and we have tons of clients throughout the United States, and we provide them nonprofits with lines of credit.
Awesome. Yeah. Until we had crossed paths, I didn't realize that was a thing either. Because I always think just with banking and trying to get a loan through there, but being specialized with nonprofits, I'm sure gives you a lot more insight. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to smaller nonprofits in terms of getting funding?
I hear it every day. I talk to, because we're talking to nonprofits on a consistent basis. I hear it every day that, we have people who want to get a line of credit. They either have no revenue or they have very little revenue, and they want money to start the nonprofit. And unfortunately, nobody's going to provide any type of financing, line of credit, loan, and maybe we can even get into what the difference is, to a nonprofit who has either no revenue or very little revenue. So when I say little revenue, under $250,000, and just also keep in mind that until you reach $5 million in revenue, and even then, a commercial bank would not be able to provide you with any type of loan or line of credit. So I hear it all the time. Well, how do I start my nonprofit? And so, that's what I hear every day.
Yeah. Well, let's pause there. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between a loan and a line of credit. What is the difference, and what is something that nonprofits should kind of keep in mind when they're looking at the different options like that?
Yes. Great question. And people do not understand the difference between a line of credit and a loan, and maybe they understand a mortgage a little bit better, but because they're used to it. But so a line of credit is used for short-term working capital emergencies. Think about it. It's not unusual for nonprofits, once they get going, to have uneven cash flow where they're getting funding at different intervals throughout the year, and yet they have fixed costs such as payroll, rent, other stuff. So a line of credit is good for something that you're going to use and pay back within months. It's not good. You're not, and you wouldn't get approved, is if it's something that you are going to pay back a year from now, or 6 months from now. Even then, I mean, you'll get approved, but you shouldn't use it that way. It's used for short-term expenses. A loan, which is the payback period is typically 3 to 5 years, and it's a fixed payment. You get the money all up front. A line of credit, you use it, you pay it back. You use it, and there's different amounts, so you can take whatever you want. A loan is a fixed amount of money say $10,000 or whatever, $100,000. You pay a little bit every single month for 3 to 5 years, and he paid it off. And that money is used for bigger projects, renovations. Um, um, would not be like, you would not use this for down payment on a building. You just, because they're not going to give it to you. And so it's longer type of purchases. It's just extremely rare for me to see a nonprofit with that has gotten any type of loan. Uh, so mortgages, of course, if you're buying a church, that's a specialty. We of course we don't do that. We provide a line of credit, and these are all super hard things for a nonprofit to get approved for with a commercial bank. And I'm going to dive right into why.
Mhm.
So commercial banks, local and national, are extremely risk adverse. And the reason being is they are using depositors' money to loan out. And so because of that, they have a lot of restrictions because they don't want any defaults. They want very, very little defaults. And so they want two things. Well, three things in particular. It is complicated, but these three things is what it bases down to. They want collateral. That means they want an asset that they can sell if you default. This is on a line of credit, a loan, or a mortgage. They want a personal guarantee with somebody who has good credit. So if you're a nonprofit and maybe somebody on your board says, I'll put up my house for you and I will also sign personally, you have a better chance of getting any type of loan or line of credit. That's a different story. A bank might say yes. I've almost never seen that happen where somebody would be willing to do that. And then the third thing is they want to see good cash flow. They want to see that you have cash coming in and out of your organization. Those are incredible hurdles for a young or new nonprofit to overcome. So then it comes to the next question I know, Ken, you're going to ask me, and that is, well, how do I start it? How do I start my organization? I hear that every day, and I hear people's frustration, and it's done. It is, people are starting organizations, they're growing nonprofits. And the way that they do it is one step at a time. They first start off by maybe getting donations, and then maybe they start off with fundraising events, and then they start off with golf tournaments or some type of banquet, auctions. Then then they start. By the way, from my experience, if you have zero revenue, you are not going to win any grants. A foundation that's issuing grants is going to want to see that you have operations that are working. And the other thing I often get calls for is people saying, I won this big grant from the state or from the federal government, but I need to put up the money first. How do I finance this? And the answer is you can't. You just can't do it. So you have to build the organizations. Of course, another way is a donor, finding a major donor who really believes in your cause. And by the way, all of these lessons that you learn on fundraising as a young nonprofit is exactly the same type of skill set you will need throughout the whole life of the organization. Regardless if you're at 5 million or 10 million, whatever, you will always have to learn and build a system for generating revenue. And most people get into nonprofit work because they want to help a cause. And that's fantastic. We need people like that. But the fact of the matter is, founders and CEOs or executive directors of nonprofits, they have to be great at finding the money. That's what you have to be great at. Unfortunately, it's not great about solving world hunger. It's not great about reducing homeless. You have to be really good at getting the money so that you can serve your cause. And that's a completely different skill set than most people have.
That's good. And yeah, it really is hard to like get in the work, and it is so important because I feel like the structures that you build when you start is something that just scales up as you grow. And like if you don't have that ethic now, that hard work ethic, you're just not going to have it, even if you do land $1 million grant from the federal government or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think it's work ethic. I
Mhm.
think it's a personality.
Mhm.
People who get into nonprofit are not people who think, and Matt, sometimes they have disdain for money. So it's a personality, um, you know, and so, if you're somebody who's listening to this who says, um, I I don't I care about the cause that I'm about to do, but I don't want to raise money. You're not, unfortunately, that's not what a nonprofit director does.
That's true. Um, why do you think that so many nonprofit leaders are adverse to money? Do you think it's just because they're so passionate about the cause? What do you think is like do you think it's just personality type? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I would just be guessing. I don't really know. I mean, not everybody's good with money. It takes a lot. I mean, who make good executive directors? People who were in the business world prior, or who ran a big nonprofit, who know that their primary job, their only job, is to raise money. Rather they do that through grants, rather they do it through major donors, rather they do that through events. You know, a nonprofit really is well run if it's following a for-profit model. And a for-profit model is, everything comes down to, um, I wouldn't say making money, but I would say is driving the top line, which is revenue, sales, and for profit, it's sales or revenue. In nonprofit, it's revenue, right? So that would be, grants, funding, all the things that we know that drives it. Your success for your nonprofit's cause will be completely dependent upon your ability to raise money, just like a for-profit is. Just like when we've all seen Shark Tank, right? Where people are raising money, right? The
Yeah,
success of those businesses is based on revenue, rather, Shark Tank gives an idea that the only way to raise money is through investors. Well, that's not the way it is, really. There's plenty of ways to raise money. So just like there is for a nonprofit, there's plenty of ways. So if you're going to start a nonprofit, go for it. I'm really proud of you. We need your help. When I say we as human beings need people solving problems out there. But you're going to have a plan to raise money, because you're not going to get it from a financing company. And you're also not going to get it from the government. They don't give SBA loans for nonprofits. And grants don't give money to startup nonprofits. I'd say you kind of need to reach the $500,000 in revenue point when you'll start, and you've been around for over 3 years. When then there's organizations out there that will give you a grant, because some of them are designed that way to help newer organizations.
Now, you've worked with a lot of different nonprofits during your time. What do you think is like one of the biggest, when it comes to filling out applications for a line of credit, what do you think is like one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of the nonprofits make?
Well, they got to know their numbers. So they got to know their revenue. You got to know that nonprofits have revenue too. Just like if you're a new nonprofit, I don't know if most people understand, that the newer people, nonprofit directors understand that nonprofits have revenue. So, the, I, maybe part of it's too, when I talk to people on the phone and they tell me that they have zero revenue and they need help, I tell them, I don't say it in these words, but stop wasting your time. You're not going to find anybody who's going to be able to finance your nonprofit. So, yeah. So, yeah, I don't think about, if your credit is bad, that's a problem. That's going to be a major problem. Your personal credit, okay? Because all of the nonprofits that apply have no security. It's no security. They're uncollateralized lines of credit. In other words, they're not putting up a house, or they're not putting up a building. They're not putting up stocks or bonds. That's collateral in case you default. And so one of the things that lenders look at is your personal credit score, because you're running the organization. So, if someone has crappy credit, then, and crappy credit would be defined, depending on who you're working with, it's either under 650 credit score or 700 credit score. If you are in the 500s, no one's going to give you money. So.
Yeah. So, if you were to start a nonprofit yourself, what would be like the first way that you would try to generate the most revenue? Would you focus more on like the events? Would you focus more on individuals, major donors? What would be like your first step?
Well, first thing I would do if I was going to start a nonprofit is build a business plan. And then I'd have all those things incorporated, because I would know the number one. I wouldn't even think about, as much about what we're going to serve. So so the first thing I would do is, have a compelling cause that's well articulated, where where I tell a great story. I would go to all the people I know who have money, and I would tell them what I'm trying to do, and get money from them. And then I would have events, a variety of different events. I would also start early on to solicit a rather larger board. And the people I would have on those board are all people that would be good at soliciting money, donations. They would be able to, like, I'm not going to have somebody on there who is like a good friend who is really shy who is an extreme introvert, who is, has two friends that don't have money, and they're on my board because I'm like, oh, well, you're my best friend. I want you on my board. I if I'm going to build it, then I'm going to have people who are movers and shakers. And then I'm also going to have, I'll probably, maybe I would start off with one event and, really, work that event. And, people like the idea of something that's new, that if they're really passionate about it. It's hard because, think of it, if I was to start it, I mean, it's one thing because, I have a company that's running on its own, but most people have a full-time job. So this is something that you're going to have to do on the side. And, you should expect, if you're going to do this, let's say you're working 40, 50 hours a week at your regular job, that you're going to put 20 to 30 hours in extra a week for a year. So think 80-hour work weeks. That's if you have a full-time job. If your significant other, maybe he's working and this is something that you're going to do, well, then you can dedicate the time to it. There's also so much good information out there, about nonprofits. I would certainly would either read or listen to a lot of podcasts that are out there about nonprofits and really get educated in the space. I'd probably take 3 months of doing that to get super educated. Then I'd build my business plan. And then maybe I'd try to find a mentor who's in nonprofit already, who can help me leap step the steps that are involved. There's plenty of people out there who would be happy to mentor a new nonprofit. And all you need to do is ask. And I wouldn't go to a small nonprofit. I'd go to one that's at least $5 million in revenue, at least, and go there. And if you know somebody who runs like a $100 million nonprofit, I'd make sure that person has built small nonprofits before in their past, because if they haven't, then they don't know your world.
Yeah, that's such great advice, because especially like I think with the mentorship, there's over 1.5 million nonprofits out there, like, and there are so many people that have been in your shoes, and a lot of, like you said before, a lot of the nonprofit people, like when you get into the nonprofit world, you get into it because you want to help a cause. You have that heart to help people. And especially like if you can pass on all of the knowledge, all of the mistakes that you made to help another person not do the same things or do things better than you did, I'm sure a lot of people would like that. So I think that's really good. Last question before we wrap up, and you can tell us a little bit more about how others can get connected to you. Can we talk really quick about board of directors? How important is it to have a solid board when it comes to lines of credit and financing and things like that?
So, well, not for lines of credit and not for any type of financing. I don't think the board really does that. The purpose of the board for a nonprofit that's under $5 million in revenue, okay, is to help to raise money. That's the only purpose of the board. Okay, so if they can't help you raise money, if they can't do it themselves, if they're not willing to go out themselves and help you or contribute money. Now, listen, let's face it, most people who are on boards, everybody who's on a board is the major donor of the nonprofit. You basically are buying yourself a board seat. So, $5,000, $10,000, whatever the donation is, that's why a board member is there. They're not there to help you build a business plan. They're not there to help you manage the complexities of building an organization. They're there for a specific purpose, and that is for raising money. That could be an event that maybe maybe they're great at, planning events and those type of things, and you can hand that off to them and they're going to go to town. Now there's sweat equity. Yeah. If someone has a really unique skill set, like someone who's a party planner, right, and wants to be on your board, but maybe they don't have enough money, I still think that they should make a donation, by the way. But that means they're committed. Okay. But, that's a unique skill set, somebody who can run and just, maybe the first year you generate $25,000, and then the next year you generate $75,000. And then the following year you generate $150,000. By the way, this is all very small money, so it's, for some people, they might think that's a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. So, and just to be clear, if I get 50 applications for a line of credit, I would say, I would just be a guess. I would say 80 to 90% of them are not qualified to get a line of credit because their revenue is too small. So it's hard to, there's a lot of people wanting to start nonprofits. There's a lot of very small nonprofits out there. And the biggest problem they have is finding money.
That's good to know. So if someone wants to get in contact with you or see about doing an application, what's the best way to contact you?
Well, they should have at least $200,000 in revenue. And again, you would only qualify for a $7,000 line of credit. A line of credit is very valuable to have because it doesn't cost, in our case, it doesn't cost anything to set up. It doesn't cost anything when it's not being used. And it's used for emergency purpose. That's typically what happens. I had payroll that's due. You can't miss payroll, by the way, legally. And also it causes a lot of problems in the office. So that's the number one reason why people use the line of credit, but it could be something else. And it's a good thing to start and get that in place, but you have to have at least $200,000 in revenue. There's some other criteria. As I mentioned, you have to have at least a 650 or greater personal credit score too. It's not a personal guarantee against the line of credit, but we do run a credit check, more for fraud than anything else. So you would visit our website at financingsolutionsnow.com. And the application's right there. It takes you less than 2 minutes to fill out. It doesn't require any paperwork initially. And then you'll get an immediate answer if you qualify and for how much. The other thing is for the last 7 years, I do host a podcast. It's one of the top 5% podcasts in the nonprofit space. We've had over 300 episodes, and we have amazing guests that really can help you run a great organization. And that's called the Nonprofit MBA Podcast. And it's been one of the leaders in its space. So those are the two things I can mention to you.
Awesome. And I will include all of that in the show notes and description. So unless you have any other final thoughts, we can wrap it up here.
No, just don't be afraid to go for it. I mean, the money's there. It's out there. I mean, I can't tell you how many people would be willing to give money, but they're not approached. So
that's true. Yeah. Just be willing to do it.
Yep.
And yeah, I think sometimes it can be a little intimidating, but you don't have because you don't ask. And I think that's one of the biggest things as we continue to grow. I hope that all those that are listening that have your small nonprofits, that that you are encouraged to continue to just say, let's take things to the next step. Let's be intentional about generating revenue. Let's look more like a business in the sense of how we're approaching our finances and how we're approaching our budgeting. So thank you so much, Steve. It was great talking to you. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope that you guys were encouraged by what he said. I know some of it might have been like, whoa, I don't know if I can even approach Steve about funding or anything like that. And I think the biggest thing that was encouraging for me was that you have to continue to keep moving forward. And also when it comes to grants, I know sometimes it sounded like he was like, oh, don't even bother approaching grants early on. But my encouragement would be approach a grant writer early so you can assess when you'll be ready for grants. So hit me up, nonprofitmissionary@gmail.com. Also reach out on social media @nonprofitmissionary. We'll talk to you soon. Stay focused and stay funded. God bless.